Welcome everybody, welcome the examination committee members. The topic of my presentation is the impact of economic growth on poverty in Afghanistan during 2001 to 2016. Before starting, I want to briefly describe two terms of economic growth and poverty. So economic growth is the actual increase in the level of income of a country or GDP of a country in simple terms. And poverty is actually the lack of basic necessities or basic uh, entitlements which allow us, which hinders a person to live a decent life or have a decent standard of living. Okay, this hypothesis, this project has three main hypotheses. Um, the first one want to see the effect of economic growth on income inequality. The second hypothesis about the effect of economic growth on income, on poverty. And at the last, I want to see what are the factors which has contributed to income inequality in Afghanistan and how it could be improved. These hypotheses are further defined by three main objectives. The first one is to calculate and determine the level of income inequality in the sample population. Second is to find the relationship between income inequality and economic growth. And third, to understand the causes and reasons behind income inequality and also to provide some policy solutions. Okay, the main concept or the main idea is to see the relationship between economic growth and poverty. As you can see in this graph, the blue line shows poverty rate or GDP growth rate over several last years in Afghanistan. And if we consider from 2003 to 2013, the economy has grown on an average rate of 9%. On the above orange line, you can see the different estimates of poverty rate in the country. For example, in 2005, 30% of the population was poor. In 2007, it raised to 33%, and in 2011 to 38%. And according to a recent national study of ALCS, the poverty rate is about 54.4%. So as you can see, although there was a rapid economic growth in the last decade or so, which potentially should have decreased poverty rate, but that's not the case in Afghanistan, which is evidenced by the rise in poverty rate. Okay, now we will explore each hypothesis separately. First, about has economic growth contributed to income inequality in Afghanistan? First, there is no data about income inequality. So I've presented data about poverty rate, but we don't have information on how income is distributed in the country. And this survey is actually one of the first survey which provides such data. And for calculating income inequality, of course, this needs more baseline survey if someone wants to measure it over time. But unfortunately, I couldn't collect baseline data, so it's only a cross-sectional data or one-shot data. So there is no baseline data at, for income inequality at national level or also for the survey, so that we could manage and see how income inequality has changed over time. However, one could argue that in the aftermath of rapid economic growth, poverty rate has not decreased. And one possible explanation for that is that there was a high income inequality in the society, or the income was going more to a rich class, not to the poor class, and that's why poverty has not decreased. So that's one main hypothesis of this paper. In this graph you can see the cumulative GDP growth, which is increase over time, and you also see the poverty rate, which is also has a positive trend. In this slide, the survey, which has been conducted on 110 families in 2017, and based on the data that I have collected on the income and also the number of families of the each household, I've calculated the Gini index, and it is 62.7 or 7, so it's the figure, or 0.62 Gini coefficient, which is usually also used. And if the Gini index is 0, so means everyone receives equal amount of income, and if it's 100, it shows like a total unequal economic growth in the country. So which shows like it's a relatively high Gini index. And of course this study is very limited, it's only 110 families, so I will not be able to generalize this Gini index for the whole population, but however it provides a glimpse or provides a first-hand picture of this issue of income inequality. Okay, our second topic is the impact of economic growth on poverty. As you have already seen from the other national data, that poverty has been increasing over the last decades or so, and I tried to calculate different poverty rate estimates based on the data that I've collected. So here you can see that the Afghanistan's living condition survey data from 2005 to 2016, and it shows that the income, that the poverty is in rise. And if I calculate, when I calculate the data for my own survey, it shows a similar result for 2016. However, the result varies based on the different methods that I have been using. For example, using the poverty rate, the income method, if we use 1.9 USD per day as a measure, then 66% of the population would be counted as a poor based on the sample data. And if we use the measure of 120 USD per day, then that will be 52% of the population, or half of the population is poor. Another method of estimating poverty is the consumption method. So you see if a household is able to finance their consumption, like buying of foods, drinks, housing, and other stuff. And if we calculate, or if we subtract the expenses of the household from their income and see how many of them are able to meet their expenses, that will be 54% again. So more than half of the population are not able to meet their household expenditure based on their income. And if we don't consider their income and just see how many of them are able to meet their basic needs, then that will be around 50% of the population. And as a reminder, as I said in the previous slide, the ALCS has estimated poverty at 54% in 2016 and 17. Okay, few more slides about the third hypothesis, why has income inequality increased. Of course, there are a lot of other reasons behind it, but I wanted to come up with some explanation for that. And the first one, which I collected data on, is about the education level. So if a household head is well educated, we assume that they will probably have more income as compared to if they're uneducated, they will have lower income, and higher educated family heads will have higher income. And as you can see in the graph, these results are not statistically significant, but you can see the difference of the household income as compared to the level of education, and the line in between is the average income of the sampled population. English language was also an important factor in income inequality because well-paid jobs were mostly required that you speak a basic level of English, especially if you're working with international organizations and so on. These results are also not statistically significant because they vary a lot. However, from the graph you can see that those who have lower English language skills, their income are relatively low as compared to the average income, and those with high or intermediate level of English language, they have a relatively higher income. Similarly, results were also calculated and found for the computer skills. Okay, coming to the hypothesis number 3 and what policy solutions could be derived. So the last chapter, or chapter 8 of my thesis, is dedicated to policy recommendations, and the first 15 policy recommendations are general, so it's minimum wage, poverty reduction policies, and income support programs for the poor. But I received some recommendations or some comments that how these policy recommendations are connected to your studies. So this coming 10 policies are based on the finding of the household survey. So whatever policy recommendation you see here is somehow connected to the finding of the survey, and I would be happy to provide more detail if you have any question in this regard. And also, based on the findings of the key informant interviews, I've proposed these 5 other policy recommendations to reduce poverty and income inequality in Afghanistan. So that was all the main part of this presentation, and we came to the conclusion that economic growth has increased income inequality in Afghanistan. So there was a rapid economic growth, and then poverty was also in the rise. And one conclusion of the study is that because income inequality was high, or the poor was not benefiting from this economic growth, so that's why income inequality has also raised as a result of this situation. And the second is that the poverty rate has increased actually as a result of rapid economic growth, especially during these years of 2003 to 2013. And third, several factors has contributed to the income inequality and poverty of the population. And policy recommendations are mostly social policies that could be implemented to support those who are very poor and those actually who remain poor in Afghanistan. These are the 4 main books which I found interesting and very relevant to this topic of income inequality and poverty. The first one is called Capital in 21st Century by Thomas Piketty. The second one is one of his book is Measuring Poverty Around the World by Anthony Atkinson. He is a British economist at the London School of Economics, and a very famous author, Joseph Stiglitz, and also Nobel Prize winner, The Great Divide, and lastly, The Globalization of Inequality by Francis Bourguignon. That was all from my side. These are the content of the dissertation. In case if you have any specific question, you can relate your question to these topics. And I'm looking forward for a fruitful discussion and question and answer session.